I'm very happy to see so many people here today. I know you're all people that love Lois, and we're glad to have you here to help us celebrate her fabulous, amazing life. If you had the unforgettable experience of knowing Lois Swenson, you're not surprised by the number of people that are here today, because that's what Lois did. She went all through life making friends, touching people wherever she went, every day of her life. She even made friends with people who couldn't speak English. I saw her do it time and again. Her warm manner, her big grin, and her deep interest in every single person that she met transcended any language barrier. Lois and I go back a long way. I met her in 1963 at Northport Elementary School. Just a minute here. We were both just starting teaching in Robbinsdale. She taught 6th grade. My name was Golly then, and I taught 3rd. Most of our staff were young, and we were all new teachers. 6 of the women who started teaching that year at Northport became close friends, and we remained close down through all the years. You might not have recognized Lois in those days. She had her hair colored a very light platinum blonde, and she often wore it up in a beehive. She'd carefully tie a scarf over it out in the wind. Our one friend used to rat her hair for her and put it up. Lois would scream while she worked and tell her she was hurting. Our friend would tell her, "Hush, you have to suffer to be beautiful." Lois wore blue eyeshadow, very pretty lipstick, and lovely clothes. This all changed, though, when Lois began to travel and she saw how the rest of the world lived. Some of us married and had kids. Lois didn't, but she loved our kids like they were her own. She developed close relationships with all of them. She always spoke to them as though they were grown-ups. She was endlessly supportive and encouraging of them, quickly earning their love and respect. She did this with all of her neighbors' kids and all her other friends' kids, too. A lot of those young and not so young kids are here today, and I know they're feeling the loss of a dear friend and advocate. Lois always made sure that kids knew that the rest of the world was not as privileged as they were. She constantly reminded all of us that we needed to take care of the environment. We needed to recycle everything we possibly could, and we needed to be aware of all the injustices in the world. She also encouraged kids to think for themselves, to fight against things that they knew to be wrong in the world. The son of one friend said that when he was in college, she never asked him what he was studying. She just wanted to know what he was protesting. Lois's interest was not confined to our children. She also got to know our parents and our sisters and brothers. Anyone who came to town to visit always expected to get to see Lois, too. Maybe we'd all be invited over for breakfast at her house, or we would have her over. The result of all this was that Lois ended up not having just her own wonderful family in Wisconsin, but becoming a dear and important member of all of our families and families of people we didn't even know. Our families all knew her ideas about dumpster diving and recycling everything possible. One time, my mom and dad were here visiting from Iowa. Lois had found a nest of goose eggs somewhere. She called and she told me asked my mother and dad if they knew how to candle goose eggs so she could see if her eggs were likely to hatch. My mom and dad had little information on the subject. But after I hung up, my mother said, "For heaven's sake, don't accept any breakfast invitations at Lois's while we're here." Lois was one friend you could always count on to help you when you had a dirty job to do or you were moving, which we did an awful lot in those years. And if you had any trouble, big or little, she was there to give you a ride, hold your hand, or just to listen. When she had her hip replacements and her cancer, we were there for her in the ERs, the chemo rooms, and the rehabs. Lois was always in good spirits. She never complained. She just concentrated on doing whatever she had to do to get well. When her hair started to come out from the chemo, we all advised her to go right down and have her hair all buzzed off. She didn't want to, though. She just wore a soft stocking cap all day, then went outside at night, took her cap off, and shook it out into the wind. She said she did that so that the birds could use her hair in building their nests. And maybe they did. During the year of 2010, when Lois was so sick, we were all so afraid we were going to lose her. But she fought the cancer every way she could. When she was in chemo, she knew she was susceptible to infection, so she gave people hugs from 3 feet away for a whole year. She loved sweets, but she always refused them because she had heard that sugar feeds cancer. We were all so relieved when she got the all-clear report last year. We were so happy to have her out of danger, up and running, and ready for more years of her amazing life. Lois, wherever you are, rest in peace. I'll miss you.
Well, I feel pretty humble today because I hear I'm speaking to probably the most illustrious group of people in the whole Twin Cities, those who knew and loved Lois Swenson. I can't think of any better group to speak to. And I know any one of you here could come and do a better job, but I've been chosen, so you got to listen to me. Got to put my glasses on. I decided that I should talk to you about an award I'm going to ask for Lois to get. Now, it's never been given to anybody who's not living, but that doesn't make any difference. I'm going to propose it anyway. It's called the Right Livelihood Award. It was established in 1980 and is presented annually to individuals who have made outstanding contributions in the fields of environmental protection, human rights, sustainable development, health, education, and peace. Among the recipients have been Mordecai Vanunu, Daniel Ellsberg, and Vandana Shiva. Democracy Now! Describes the prize as widely recognized as the world's premium award for personal courage and social transformation. And who better could fit that than Lois? And now I'll address each issue of the award. Environmental protection. Lois was protecting the environment before the ward was even proposed, and I think probably before most people knew the environment needed to be protected. One could not throw away even a bottle cap, much less something that could be recycled, such as a banged up pot that nobody could put on the stove, but she knew somebody that could use it, so you couldn't throw it away. She would toss it in the back of her car to be given somebody who needed a pot. And unlike most of us whose friends and acquaintances are among those in our own economic class, most of us live that way, pretty isolated. She knew people from all walks of life. And as far as human rights goes, this is the second category. I, like all of you here, I suppose, signed countless resolutions and petitions having to do with human rights. Every day on my computer, at least 8. But Lois didn't let the computer be her alter ego. She took into her home the homeless. She never denigrated anybody. Everybody was eligible. That, of course, was in addition to her being ever present at demonstrations and actions connected with justice. At one time, she housed individuals from every continent, I'd say, with possibly the exception, and here I wrote Australia. I didn't know she had been to Australia, so I'm going to change that to Antarctica. In sustainable development, I didn't know the exact dimensions of the lot containing Lois's house, but in it she maintained a vegetable garden, a living example in her belief in sustainable development, plus the flowers in her front yard. I dripped tomato juice all over my t-shirt one day, sampling a delicious little tomato from that spot. She encouraged everybody to maintain gardens. She encouraged us to be judicious in our buying habits. She did her best not to show disapproval of those who didn't live up to her high standards in buying. Although one day I did catch her disapproval glancing at the canned products in my cupboard and the little plastic containers of this or that that I had in my refrigerator. Anyone who knew Lois, even to some degree, was influenced by her concerns. You ended up paying more attention to your habits, whether you wanted to or not. As far as health goes, since she was extraordinarily healthy, I don't remember even much talk about that. I can't imagine Lois in a pair of high-heel shoes. I did today when I saw these pictures here, or an extravagant dress. I suspect that some of her t-shirts and slacks came right straight from the dumpsters, after washing, of course. They weren't ragged or stained, but they were by no means new designer clothing. Personally, she took good care of herself and survived a bout of cancer with the good grace that was her want. The fifth category is education. A former grade school teacher, of course she believed in education, formal education. She also believed in being educated about the state of the world, what was happening across the globe, what the United States was doing, and far too often what it shouldn't be doing. She was aware and knowledgeable, but she didn't involve herself in long philosophical discussions. There was just too much to be done. Even more, there was just too much this country was involved in that needed to be undone for her to spend too much time in conversations that went no place. When it came to peace, Lois was ever present at the demonstrations, lectures, gatherings, anything that had to do with peace. And she stressed the issue in her church, the Lutheran Church of which she was a member. And she reminded clergy and a laity alike of the nonviolence of Jesus and how important it was for all of us to recognize this if ever there were to be peace in the world. She was absolutely unsystematic at this. I remember being in the car with her one time, and she said, "I want to stop here for just a minute. I know the pastor here, and he should hear from me." And there is absolutely no one that I could think of who would more deserve this Right Livelihood Award than Lois Swenson, even though she's no longer with us. I wanted to add 2 requirements to the issues that the Right Livelihood Award is going to address, but they would be love and forgiveness. Lois was a person who believed in love, and who forgave. She excelled in both qualities, and I'm sure that she would be, if she were here today, she would ask forgiveness for the individual who brought her life to such an early end. Thank you.
I met a saint once. His name was Vinoba Bhave. He was Gandhi's spiritual advisor and political successor, named by Gandhi. He organized a nonviolent land reform movement where he convinced rich landowners to give hundreds of thousands of acres to the rural poor. Everyone said that only a saint could do it. Everyone agreed he was a saint. When I was ushered in to see him with some trepidation, I saw an ancient man sitting on the ground, white beard, white hair, calm, saintly. So I went up to him and I bowed and touched his feet to show respect, and I sat down in some awe, waiting for words of wisdom. He didn't really glance at me, but he stood up and he turned around and he very loudly passed gas. And then he sat down and, you know, we had a really good conversation. I'd like my saints to be human, to understand how really special they are, to be so normal yet so extraordinary. Like Lois. Lois was very human. She was full of virtues, she was full of flaws. She liked to tease. She liked being teased. Obviously, she had brothers and she had learned to give and to receive. One great topic to tease Lois was her enthusiasms, virtues that have probably attracted most of you here, knowing of her enthusiasms. I met her in the spring of 1976 when she signed up for a teacher's tour 6 weeks in Guatemala and Honduras. We arrived in Guatemala with $5 a day for food and lodging and buses to travel around the country. It wasn't a very sanitary trip. But Lois was very moved by what she saw, by the poverty, by the disease, but even more by the hope and the struggle we observed. She saw how hard people worked to feed their families and understood they were not poor because they didn't work. But, you know, she was also a bit of an extremist. And in her desire to right the imbalance of resources, she insisted that we all use only one sheet of toilet paper when we went to the bathroom. One sheet. I was supposed to be worrying about people not getting diarrhea, and Lois was worrying about the overuse of toilet paper. She also couldn't seem to learn Spanish. She had studied beforehand. She finally learned to say buenos dias in a Wisconsin accent, but the words just didn't seem to stick with her. So I was really puzzled when some of the other teachers who had studied Spanish and seemed to me like they were doing pretty well, began to ask Lois to go to the market with them to help them bargain because people understood her better. I'm saying, what's with this? Well, I finally got to see it myself. The sun was really beating down hot, and we were standing as a group under a mango tree in the shade. And this young kid, about 12, 13, rides by on a bike. And Lois says to him, "Oh, that's a nice bike. Can I try it?" And he stopped. He handed her the bike. She laughed, got on, rode away. She was having fun. So I said to the kid in Spanish, "Oh, where did you learn English?" And he said to me in Spanish, "Oh, I don't know English." And I said, well, why did you give her a bike, your bike? And he said, well, she asked for it, didn't she? So I didn't ever understand it, but I did come to believe that in any situation and in any language, Lois could make herself understood. Every day she performed a miracle of connection. Another of her enthusiasms, already referred to, was dumpster diving. So one of the teachers, Carolyn Halliday on the trip, had this Indian print dress made out of a tablecloth, red, didn't show dirt, great for traveling. But as the 6 weeks rolled around, she started describing with greater enthusiasm her intention to throw this thing away as soon as the trip was over. And sure enough, last night in Guatemala City, she tossed it in the trash, and we returned home. 6 months later, Lois and I drove up to Duluth for Carolyn's wedding. And sure enough, yeah, you know, Lois wore that dress. She loved to tease, but always kind, but that also made it fun to tease her. Lois was full of humor. Her humor was warm and deep. It was always within her, always ready to take a turn, regardless of the situation. She would be angry about issues, she would care about issues, she'd show up, as Polly said, to any demonstration or meeting for a demonstration on any topic. But Lois was always ready to warmly support and love the people who were there, to foster their togetherness with her unique sense of humor, and to tease out hope. After returning from the trip, Lois wrote a curriculum about what she'd learned in Guatemala. She thought about how to help children understand the world and the moral imperatives of solidarity and purpose. I was not surprised when she was named Minnesota Teacher of the Year. She could communicate with a kid on a bicycle in Honduras once and win his trust. How much more could she communicate to children who she loved and she taught every day? Lois always told me that her trip to Central America had changed her life. She joined the Third World Institute study group and was part of the group to start the Nestle boycott. She went out every week to speak at a school, a co-op, a church, and when we passed out letters we got from around the country, she always took a batch home to write personal letters to encourage their involvement. She had a missionary zeal to spread the word and engage others. Lois knew, though, for her to connect to an issue, she had to do it through people, not through intellect or through study, but through people. So she returned to Mexico, trying again to study Spanish. But really what she wanted to do was make connections and then to share those connections and that revelation with her friends. And she started to organize her teacher friends and her church friends to go with her on trips to Central America and Mexico. And she prodded them gently, but very firmly, to get involved in the issues that mattered to her. Lois volunteered at the Center for Victims of Torture. Who else besides Lois would spend hours and hours on a bus, transfer by transfer, to teach a torture survivor how to navigate the Twin Cities? CVT's clinicians knew that finding a stable place to live was a necessary first step for recovery. Exile is world-changing. It's frightening. The clinicians saw people like Lois, that very rare Samaritan, as God sent. And for over 25 years, Lois had refugee roommates, both men and women, at different times. She always talked about how much she learned from them. She was a constant goodwill ambassador for the displaced, and she tried to help others see this as an opportunity from the same framework she did. But being Lois, with a sense of humor, she'd often point out to people how your house could house many more people if you're really not using it anyway. But abused and traumatized people are not saints because of the experience. They deserve our support, but they can be demanding, volatile, paranoid, depressed, full of anxiety, subject to panic attacks, as well as often being amazing people. You need to know this to begin to understand the depth of the gift Lois made to the world of justice and healing, because she chose to bear the pain and suffering of others so she could lend a hand. I am awed by the effort that she made and her humble willingness to learn and appreciate the experience even when it was very difficult. Lois would be worried now that others would interpret her death arising from her risk-taking and her open heart. She would worry that her friends might turn away from refugees and our increasingly diverse community. She would worry about the political impact of her murder. And I think she would be right to worry about us. That's why we need to appreciate Lois as a fully realized human being with virtues and flaws, and understand that even with those flaws, Lois chose to open herself to the world and to understand it. Lois chose to leave a safe life and take up a life with insecurity and voluntary poverty. Lois chose to act with others to challenge injustice and the powerful. Lois chose to open her home to refugees. Lois chose to devote her life to making a difference and to making us laugh and to making us strive to be better. Lois chose to be brave, and she was so very brave. So let us choose to follow Lois. Thank you.